I sort of think of trumpet as like a craft and composition as artistry.
So welcome and thank you for these 3 questions. Today I'm speaking with Adrian Kelly, who's a great trumpet player and composer. Many other research into musical theatre studies, a father, and a very versatile musician, playing in all sorts of styles. So thank you for joining me for these 3 questions.
Thanks for having me on, Mace. It's great.
The first question is, why do you have music in your life?
Well, I think it's kind of been inevitable from the beginning. There was always music in our house, and it was always kind of treated, my parents aren't musicians, but it was always kind of treated as a precious thing. I remember my dad used to dub records onto tapes and things like that, and it was always, don't go near the record player, don't jump around, don't, it was really precious. Yeah. We have to sit and listen. And also I grew up in a pub, so I had free access to the jukebox downstairs.
Oh, really? What pub was that?
I was born in the north of England.
Oh, okay.
So
doesn't everyone grow up in the pub in the north of England?
Pretty much. Yeah, we all grow up in pubs and we all play the cornet.
yeah, okay.
And it was I had a really kind of wide-ranging menu of music to listen to when I was growing up. So, like, Dad had a lot of jazz records, a lot of Sinatra, and I remember listening to Bird with Strings. He had that album, and another album called, it was like Parker Jam Session, it was like a compilation album that had some great tracks with Charlie Shavers playing trumpet on it, which was really kind of inspiring. And then when I was about 6, Dad kind of called me up to him and was like, come here, I want to have a word with you. And I'm like, oh, racking my brain, my 6-year-old self's like, what have I done? I'm in trouble here. And he hands me this case, and I open it up, and there's a nice silver cornet in there. He's like, okay, you got a lesson on Friday, away you go. So that was that.
Had you had had you shown interest in it, or was it just something that your dad felt as if you had to do?
I can't remember. Like, I know I was kind of interested in art and drawing and all that kind of stuff. So I guess the artistic thing was there, maybe, but I can't remember. I mean, I remember loving music, and there was a TV show we used to watch, and I cannot remember what it was called. And there was a trumpet player who always played on the end of it. It was a British TV show. I mean, if anyone knows, I'd love to find out what it was. And he used to sing this song called Dedication about how it takes a lot of work and stuff to be great and things like that, and played the trumpet. And I remember kind of digging that. But it was a surprise anyway when I got the cornet and went to my lesson. And I guess it all kind of happened pretty quick. Like it kind of felt good from the beginning, and it was fun kind of making quacky noises with the mouthpiece at my mates and all that kind of stuff, and was pretty quickly into like a brass quintet things. Like, say, north of England, saw brass bands and brass quintet and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then when we moved to Australia in 1983, and so because I'd started early, I was kind of ahead of the ball then, ahead of the curve. So, when you're that age and you're kind of good at something, you naturally gravitate towards it.
Yeah.
When I got to high school, like in the band, when I first got to high school, in the stage band, in the big bands, there were people like Chris Grieve and Jamie Ollers and the Mackey brothers and Jordan Murray and, the Rick Eastman. It was like a who's who of jazz, but they were all at high school.
Right.
Like they were like 12. And, so me going in as a year 8 and hearing that band was just like, whoa, okay, this is the thing.
Yeah.
From there, like, I kind of flitted with the idea of being an Air Force pilot and stuff like that, as you do when you're a kid, because, what can I do? And then we formed a little trad jazz band at school, and then that was it. We were going to do music then. When kind of got into improvising a bit and jazz and things like that. And then I kind of got into composition once I was at uni. Didn't really have anything to do with it before then.
I remember your compositions with Wajo back in the
that was
early 2000s or
it would have been 2000 because we played some of that stuff at the Olympics, I think. At, the fringe of the Olympics. I think I kind of got into composition through music copying, really. Like I kind of liked all that calligraphy or the kind of the art of what it looked like, and then it was kind of evolved from there, I think.
Right.
Back in the days when we had to handwrite everything.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot to be learnt from that. You know, you have to actually know how to, from a blank piece of paper to make it look right. There's no presets. There's nothing already printed on there.
That's it.
I think it's really important, and it's an art form that's being lost.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's good, it makes you slow down, and there's no playback. So you kind of hear it or have access to a piano or something. Yeah,
or just try stuff.
Yeah.
And you take a risk, and it's like, that worked, or oh my God, I will never do that again. Yeah. Well, I'll try never to do that again.
You don't want to copy it all out again.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I'm glad sort of at my time at uni was it was kind of at the end of that. Sibelius had come in, but we still had Keith Van Gazel still made us write everything out, calligraphy pen, and it was, I still remember all those lessons.
Yeah, and they carry through too, like formatting a score on Sibelius, you still know how to kind of lay it out. You're aware, you're watching for page turns and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's changing now with iPads and things.
Oh, everything's changing.
Everything's changing,
I guess you got into composition and still pursuing the trumpet. Do you sort of consider yourself more a composer or a player, or is it just all the same?
I think it depends on the week. I mean, the last couple of months has definitely been more composer.
Yeah.
Just because there's been no opportunity to play, obviously. And I guess I sort of think of trumpet as like a craft and composition as artistry.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I approach, a lot of my trumpet work is in musical theatre and like kind of lead playing, big band playing, that kind of stuff, commercial music, things like that. So it's a lot of reading and just being accurate, playing the same way, the same thing, the same way every night, 8 shows a week, doing things like that. So I kind of think of that as kind of the craft of it. And of course there's a lot of overlap. But I guess that's how I approach it a bit more. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that sort of, I guess that kind of leads into, the second question, which is, how do you make music? So that's an interesting perspective on, because I guess it's different for everyone, but I sort of, I guess some people will consider, your composition, the craft and the instrument as the creative. So that's a really interesting perspective.
I kind of ended up more down that commercial, for want of a better word, music side. But it does mean that when I do kind of improvisation projects or projects where I'm improvising, they're wholly in the artistic bag.
Right.
I kind of like Marcus Stockhausen's take on it, of it being intuitive music rather than being in a particular style. Or
when you're talking about composition as being sort of the creative outlet, how do you make music in sort of a composition sense?
I think it almost always comes from some kind of extra musical idea, something outside of music. So I just wrote a piece for flute and cello that was about the idea of the harlequin and the kind of the fool speaking to power. So that was like the extra musical idea.
Yeah.
The album
Plenty of inspiration right now.
Yes, lots of inspiration there. The album I've just released was all music that I wrote to my father's artwork. So there was the extra musical idea there.
And how did you approach that? Because, you know, I guess when people are thinking about composition, it's often, well, you know, someone sitting at a piano just trying to find the right notes. But how do you grab inspiration from a sort of a visual perspective?
It's interesting with that one we've just done, because I firstly I had the people in mind that I wanted to work with. So Victoria Newton and Simon Jeans and Pete Jevons. And I kind of knew that I wanted to write for them as improvisers. Yeah. And then I approached it kind of like this, like a sketch that you would do before the painting happens. So I wrote just small little fragments that were linked kind of theoretically, but maybe not so overtly obvious that they were linked.
Yeah.
And so I presented like little musical lines that I'd worked out. I played on my trumpet. I didn't use a piano at all for that one. Right. And sometimes presented them without rhythm, sometimes presented rhythm without notes. There's like the odd bar here and there, which is actually notated. And the idea being that I was choosing harmony or melodic structures that to me kind of reflected not just what was in the painting, but kind of my thoughts about my father when he was doing them, and where they hung in the house as I was growing up.
Yeah.
And the kind of the discussions that I'd had with him, you know, he'd often come and say, look at this, you know, does it look right? And we talk about perspective and things like that. So those were the kind of the ideas I was playing with, I guess, with that project.
Right.
Yeah. And actually that reminds me of, I took lessons with Nigel Saban for a year, great Australian composer. And he talked about setting up structures and kind of almost using like mathematical ideas and using that as a way to access your subconscious. And I think there was a bit of that going on, you know, so I'd work out, I'd play a line that I liked, and then from there I'd kind of turn it into a mathematical formula and use that to spin out new material that we were going to improvise on. And kind of through that, kind of accessing the stuff that I can't think about, the embodied knowledge, if you want to research.
Yeah. Right. And then how did you sort of communicate that to the ensemble? Was it sort of the same kind of like just small sketches, and then there was like discussion beforehand, or?
Yeah, as little discussion as possible, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think it was pretty frustrating for the guys to deal with, because I'm really not precious about my compositions. Like I write the stuff, and then once I give it over to the players, I try and let the players lead where it goes.
Well, it helps when you've got really great musicians that you feel comfortable with and you've worked with for so many years as well. So, yeah. That's
right, yeah. And I would be less comfortable presenting it with a different set of musicians. It'd be an interesting journey to do that, but I'm not sure how well it would work, given that I had those musicians in my head as I was writing it. But I had some ideas, like I would write something like, on Victoria's part, I'd write shadow the trumpet, and I'd explain to her what I meant by shadow, just follow closely, you know, try and just copy what I'm doing, but like a little bit later, almost like a delay on the trumpet.
Yep.
Things like that. So I had those kind of concepts that I explained, but I tried not to dictate what they actually did with the material.
Yeah.
I don't always write like that, but for this project, that was kind of a thing I was exploring.
To give away a lot of that control can be hard, especially, I guess there's, because, it's your, based on the artworks of your, father, it's obviously quite a personal thing, and it's quite a brave thing to do, is to kind of just give the control over. And also a very different perspective, I guess, to your trumpet playing, which you were saying is very, you got to get it right. It's very controlled. It's got to be the same every night. And then the opposite, and then you go the complete opposite, where it's very personal and you just give all control away. So
I just think that's what keeps me sane. If I was only doing 8 shows a week, I don't know how long my sanity would last. And the same token, if I was always having that kind of free flowing thing, again, I'd probably go crazy or even faster.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, I understand. The third question is what excites you musically right now?
I'm pretty excited to have done a gig last night.
Simple things. We're going back to simple pleasures.
Yeah. But I mean, working with the quartet has been really great. I'm hoping to continue doing things with them. They're just incredible musicians, and it's been really exciting because it's all improvised, to have those kind of interactions and discussions with those people. And hanging out with musicians is just great fun. And working on this material, I got to hang out with them a lot, which was great. In terms of what excites me, I'm really into Marcus Stockhausen at the moment. Just his improvised music, I think, is really, really interesting, especially some of the stuff he's done with orchestra. And it just kind of seamlessly blends the improvisation with the orchestra, and I find that really interesting at the moment. And the other thing is my PhD work is kind of all-consuming, I guess, at the moment. But I'm looking at applying acting techniques to music, which I think is a really interesting avenue. It's kind of looking at how we can apply Stanislavski to the way that we approach music. And I'm looking at it in the perspective of musical theatre, but I think there's something there to be investigated with regards to improvisation as well, and kind of how we interpret lines and how we kind of act through our instrument. And tell stories and things like that. So I think that's really interesting. And also watching my son discover music is really exciting. The first time he's played a low C on the trumpet. He's only 15 months old.
Oh, right. What?
So obviously he's a genius.
Of course.
Seeing him shake the shaker or, hit the glockenspiel, he pulls the glockenspiel over and pulls over a bunch of boxes and starts hitting them. And, it's great fun.
There's a recording project there. You could just let him improvise and you guys just play around. Yeah. That'd be really cool.
Yeah. Stick him in the middle of the quartet, see what happens. I mean, I'm sure that's something that all parents experience, but that's really exciting for me at the moment.
Oh, it would be, yeah.
And seeing what he reacts to and what he kind of just sits through and what he reacts to is really interesting and fun.
Any insights into what the kids are into these days?
Well, he really likes the Eagles.
Right.
Yeah.
I assume the Eagles would have an older demographic, but
well, you would think so, right? But yeah, it could just be because the album that we play has applause on it, so he's kind of into clapping.
Oh, just into the clap. Yeah, it's over! Yay!
But he likes the Miles Jack Johnson album, which is pretty cool. He kind of grooves along to that, gets his head bobbing, which is good.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
Yeah. It's,
Oh, very sophisticated young man.
Well, we'll see.
Well, yeah, thank you. That was very insightful, and we'll have some links to your music and your new album in the description bit down below. And so, yeah, thanks for sharing your time, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great to talk to you. Cheers.